Today we have Frank Portinari off from the podcast, Frankly Speaking, with Frank Portinari. As you can see, he's wearing his T-shirt. How are you today, Frank?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good, mate. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, always ask my interviewees this because in this weird time, you know, everyone's struggling. Hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel, but you never know. So we'll crack on. You're a Spurs fan for your sins. So what attracted you to football? Because like a lot of the lads would stay in the pub, playing pool, playing darts. But for whatever reason, we decided to stand on terraces and travelling away to God knows where and standing on freezing terraces watching football. And it doesn't sound very attractive when you say it like that, but there's something that gets a hold of you. Can you explain why football, Frank?
I think in my case, it was probably a generational thing. So if you take into account, I was growing up in the 60s. There was only so much to do. So where I lived, it was all bombed out old houses or houses that were being redeveloped. So there was lots of wasteland, there was lots of railway land. That's where we used to play when we were kids. If you take into account the old televisions, if you had a television, if you were lucky to have a television, come to think of it, people talk about watching a World Cup final. We never watched it because we never had a telly. So when you did get a telly, you might have had to have rented it in the first place. Black and white. I think it was only 2 channels, if I remember rightly. Eventually, it did go up to 3 channels. So it wasn't a great deal to watch. So you spent most of your time as kids out on the street. So of course, you picked your football team. In my street, it was mainly Tottenham supporters.
Yeah.
You always get a Man United fan, don't you, wherever you go in the world. If you were fucking marooned with someone on an island and the first person you met, you'd support Man United, wouldn't they? So that's a kind of given. The kids in the flats round the corner were mainly Arsenal, so we tended not to mix with them too much. And we played football, non-stop football. We didn't have football pitches. We just played from one side of the road to the other. The gable walls were the goals. You know, you chalk up the goal on the side of the wall. Don't forget, there wasn't as many cars on the road in them days, so you could do that. And we'd be out till it got dark. You know, your parents knew you was all right. We was all together. We was all pals. Yeah. So we'd be out playing football. But if you wanted to see your heroes, don't forget you didn't have match of the day in the 60s as such. You didn't have football on every day of the week. You know, half a dozen games a day sometimes. So if you wanted to see your heroes, you had to go to football, and that's how it started. By the time I got to my early teens, if I wanted to see the likes of Jimmy Greaves or Alan Gilzine and Pat Jennings and people like that, you had to go to the football.
Yeah. So you said your early teens is when you started going to Spurs. You've mentioned Arsenal, which I will ask you about a bit later on within the
yeah, sure.
But so you obviously was going to football in your early teens. As a teenager, you naturally are looking for groups to be involved in, and let's face it, you want to get up to no good. It's just natural within a male to do that. So when did you sort of start getting into the naughty side of football, as I call it?
I would say, well, my first experience of it was when I was 14, and that wasn't me participating. That was me being more of a victim of it, if you like.
Yeah.
Because I can vaguely remember a first home game. It was probably before this. I can vaguely remember the 1969-1970 season, and the first game in the August was Tottenham and West Ham, and it was 2-2. But so I'd have been 13. So I don't really 13 coming up to 14. I don't really remember any violence. I dare say there must have been West Ham and something.
Yeah,
but
of course. Yeah.
I don't specifically remember it. But what I do remember is the next season. So then I would have been, I'd still be just 14. I went to Main Road on my own. And my old man used to work for an haulage firm, but it was part of the railway, and he should get free tickets. But he wasn't allowed to use a ticket on the football specials.
Oh,
so
okay.
I always get a different train. Anyway, cut a long story. I got the man. I was a skinny little kid, about 10 stone 7. Had my navy and white scarf on, got on a bus from Piccadilly, went to Main Road, went through the first turnstile. And of course, it was sod's law. It was the Man City end. And it was just full of skinheads, absolutely full of skinheads. They all had bleached jean jackets and jeans, obviously sky blue because of, their colour sky blue. And they had blue and white scarves. And I stuck out like a sore thumb. And I was lucky because a copper came over because some fellas started singing at me. And a copper came over, he bashed one of them, dragged me down to the front of the stand and made me stand with a fella and his 2 kids. And we lost 4-0. I left about 10 minutes before the end, got on a bus, but some City fans had also left. And I got chased up the hill towards Piccadilly Station. Fortunately, I used to run to my school, so they didn't catch me. And when I got into the station, there was already some Tottenham skinheads. They're much older than me.
Right.
And they said, "You all right, mate?" And I said, "Oh, I've just been chased." And there was a bit of a fight in the station. And we were lucky because the police just slung us all on a special, including me. So that was probably my first experience of knowing what it was like to be in that kind of atmosphere. And I remember a Tottenham fella punching a City fan and putting him through a glass plate window. In fact, I think it was like a telephone box. And so that was my first experience. So, of course, the next, when I went to school, and I told everyone I couldn't believe I'd gone to Manchester on my own anyway, because going up north was really dangerous in them days,
Oh, yeah, completely, yeah.
Yeah, but the following week we had Liverpool at home, and of course I'm walking up the road with me and my skinny little mates, walked past the pub, and there was all these big skinheads. And as I walked past, I went, "Hello, Frank, all right, mate, how are you?" Well, of course, my mates said, "Who are they?" Oh, I said, "All my mates." I was up in Manchester with all bollocks in it. It's all bollocks. It's like, you got to put it on a little bit of swagger on a little bit, and I kind of. And then the following week, when I was at school, I kind of lived on that. So that would have been the first occasion where I experienced some degree of violence. And then later in the year, we played Chelsea, 2 legs of the League Cup, semi-final League Cup. And the leg we played at Stamford Bridge, after the game, there was a lot of trouble. And me and a mate just followed the crowd, basically. And all around the back streets, there was lots of fighting. And then we got lost. We'd come away from Fulham Broadway. We didn't know where we were. Oh. We see these Tottenham fellas going into West Brumpton Station. So we said, we'll go with them because they're big. They're bigger than us. They're older than us. And a big mob of Chelsea came in. And thank God, West Brumpton Station is an open station. And we got chased down the platform, and I hate to admit it now, but we landed up hiding in the bushes.
Right.
So the 2 lots are kind of being terrorised, for want of a better way of putting it. I thought, fuck this. It's about time I fought back. But when you're 10 stone 7, sort of 14, 15, it's all right saying it. It's all right saying it, but then coming to do it, it's 2 different things. But I'll soon learn, don't worry.
I was just going to say, Frank, your first experience at Man City at 13 years of age, being chased
14, that's it, Matt.
Well, 14.
It was 14, Matt.
14. Like being
14,
chased by full-grown men, skinheads, must have been very, very frightening. Let's face it.
I had one thought on my mind, was my scarf, because I used to wear my scarf to school, and I thought, there's no way can I go to school on Monday and not wear that and not have that scarf, not lose it on your first away game. That'd be embarrassing, Yeah. And as I say, I was quite lucky because I did used to run to the school as well, so I was pretty determined to get away,
I think,
but I always had a thing about Man City.
it's quite a strange story, Frank, that you went on your own. You travelled up there on your own. You wasn't with any mob. You wasn't with any pals. You decided on going on your own. That shows a bit of naivety of that was your age of 14. You didn't really know what it was all about. I mean, I suppose the question I'm going to ask now is when did you mould into being one of the boys in the crowd, in the firm, being known?
Well, at 15, I mean, I was having fights at school. I was clearly having fights at school. I was having fights locally, with other gangs and so on. But I hadn't thrown a punch in anger at a football match. That was the only difference. So I think once I got caught up on an occasion, so I would have been 15 probably would have been 15, I reckon. I always say to people, in the old days, it used to be hundreds onto hundreds. So when you're punching someone, you're getting a punch in the head from someone else from behind or from the side. It was crazy. Or you was getting kicked up the arse or whatever, So it wasn't like a boxing match. It wasn't one-on-one as such. It was mob on the mob. So you kind of took the attitude, well, I'm going to punch someone, but chances are I'm going to get punched back. So I was pretty philosophical about that. That's if you come home with a black eye or something, well, at least it showed you'd stood your ground. So I reckon about probably 15, and of course I started to bulk up a little bit then as well, get a bit more confident, and then you start going with different fellas, older fellas, and that's what happened in my case. I met older fellas, and sort of become our own little gang, I suppose.
Yeah, I like just. You mentioned Arsenal earlier, and I'd like to sort of say, like, the main thing has always been Spurs Arsenal or Arsenal Spurs. I know you've got rivalries with other teams. What actually is it, Frank, with Arsenal and Spurs, or Spurs and Arsenal in your case? What's the beef?
Well, I think it's just ingrained in it. We know we're not supposed to like them, and they know they're not supposed to like us. So when we were growing up, you always had it said to you, that they're not North London, they come from Woolwich, they're from South East London, they're not a proper North London team.
Yeah.
And also, because where I lived in the street, as I say, apart from one Man United fan, everyone was Tottenham. Because don't forget, the beginning of the 60s, it was all Tottenham. Tottenham had done a double, they'd done the FA Cup the next year, then they won the European Cup, Winners' Cup. So it was the first British team to win a European. Yeah. It kind of went up 67, they beat Chelsea in the FA Cup. So most young kids I knew in my street were Tottenham, and their dads were Tottenham, their uncles were Tottenham. But around the corner in the flats, for some reason, they were Arsenal. So as we was all growing up, they had their pub and we had our pub. And you just didn't go in each other's pub, and that was that.
And how far was that between, Frank? Literally, did you say?
Half a mile, if that. If that, a 2-minute walk.
But you knew that was your pub, that was their pub, and that was that.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes as you got older, it spilled over, because if you went to discos or nightclubs, you was down to West End, you was down to Lyceum. We bump into not just there. We bump into boys from Highbury, but you'd also bump into boys from West Ham, Millwall, Chelsea. Because it was the West End, so he was always liable to meet people. But that was ingrained in us. We didn't like Arsenal. They didn't like us.
Like you.
Same as in school. You tended that. Your jokes probably about a bit more in school, but once you were growing up and working, no, it should get quite nasty. It did used to get nasty amongst, between us.
Now, there's no love lost. I'll come on to, there is another thing, and obviously Spurs and Chelsea. You don't like Chelsea, Chelsea don't like you.
No.
What's the beef, though?
Look, you talk to older Chelsea fans, and I mean older than me, some of them will say that even goes back to 1967,
right?
Like the cup final.
Yeah.
And then of course the age of the skinheads. So then, battles on the street started to take place inside football grounds. And then, so yeah, some people say all the way back to this. I didn't think of that at the time. I thought it was much later than that. Although there'd been some, quite heavy confrontations between us over the years, it was always Arsenal for me. It was always Arsenal.
Yeah, I mean,
it got to a period.
Known. Yeah.
It got to a period, I suppose, in the 80s, and don't forget, it's a different generation to me again. So there seemed to be a lot of interest in Chelsea. It was, I mean, I dare say they didn't like us, so that didn't help, But he certainly, I mean, there used to be quite a decent little firm at Tottenham out in Richmond. And so there was forever having confrontations because it was West London. So that could be a Friday night, Saturday night. It didn't have to be football, No,
it spills over. Nightclubs like.
But it's hard to say now. I talk to fellas 20 years younger than me, 20, even 25, even some 10, 15 years younger than me. You ask them, who do they hate, for want of a better way of putting it, and they'll tell you Chelsea. But that's because we went through a period where there was so much more confrontation with Chelsea. Yeah, and I'm not being disrespectful. I'm not going to be disrespectful with Arsenal because that's not fair. Because I've had some mad tear-ups with Arsenal.
Yeah.
And, but there was a time we used to go over Arsenal. We'd go up the North Bank, their end, and one of a better way of putting it, we'd take the piss. Yeah. But it got to a period in the 80s where we got they weren't really coming to Tottenham, or if they were, they was getting a good hiding. And I think we got complacent. And one year we was all in the pub, and someone said, "Oh, Arsenal's coming." We went, "Oh, fuck off! We've heard all that. We've heard all that before." Yeah. And they turned up, and I mean, they proper turned up.
Yeah.
And that would have been the days of what they called the herd, then, wasn't it?
The herd. Yeah,
and no, they proper. I put my hands up, and I'll say they would take liberties outside the ground and in the ground. And in the 90s, they had a good firm in the 90s as well.
Yeah.
I don't think they get a lot of credit, Arsenal, to be honest. I don't think they get a lot of credit. I see it more now. But in the old days, they didn't get that much credit.
You didn't really hear about them because it was always
no.
West Ham, Chelsea, Tottenham.
But listen.
What I'm interested in, Frank, is that you talk a lot about the different generations. And when you first went to football, it was skinheads. So when did you notice at Tottenham people dressing differently? Obviously, there was still the old skinheads knocking about, but the casual scene was starting to take hold of clubs up and down the country. So can you remember?
Well, prior to that, Matty, you got, a lot of us worked on building sites. We did manual work.
Right.
So you might be working on a Saturday morning. You go straight from work over to Tottenham. You never had time to go and get tidied up. You went in your work clothes. So invariably, that would probably be a donkey jacket.
Yeah.
It became a bit of a fashion over Tottenham. And when we go up north or in the Midlands, if we come out of the station, we got, people instantly knew this is Tottenham because of the donkey jackets. And the more people got known to wear them, other people went and bought donkey jackets or nicked, or a mate nicked them off the council.
Work on a building site.
And you'd see people with LBC on the back, London Borough of Camden, or you'd see Borough of Hackney, or wherever they'd half-inch these donkey jackets. So I'm not saying, away games you're a little bit smarter, but you still wore the donkey jacket because it became a bit of an identity. We weren't trying to hide from them. We weren't trying to hide from mobs. We were trying to confront them. Whereas later on, over the years, the idea was to stay off the radar. Don't have the old Bill notice you. No. Don't let the other mob know you're there too soon. So the rules of engagement changed. But I clearly remember when things started, skinheads turned into suede heads, boot boys, even, I can even remember when it was long hair and the baggy trousers and, quite big heels on the shoes. But the casual bit was, I attribute that to the fellas up north, particularly the Scousers, and probably Manchester. And I know there's always going to be this argument that who discovered it and so on. And if I'm honest, I don't really know. But my guess would be probably Liverpool. And that's because they were going to Europe for the European Cup, etc.
Yeah.
And they was always in all the gear from Europe, and then after that, I think it was a mad scramble, because once people started to dress casual and very smart, and let's be honest about it, we used to say Northern Monkeys, didn't we? And they were scruffy, and they was 10 years behind us. Well, that all changed, and credit where it's due. It all changed, and they became very, very smart. Personally, I didn't go to football to look smart. I went to football to have a punch up and have a beer. I wasn't worried about what I looked like. I mean, as long as I didn't look scruffy, it wouldn't have bothered me. But it still changed, didn't it? Because if we saw people wearing Lacoste or whatever, some people remember everyone was wearing tennis stuff, tennis. 1 minute it was tennis stuff. Then it was, golf jumpers, wasn't it? Was it Lyland Scott and God knows what? There was everybody was trying to act to somebody else.
Yeah.
So to say who was the smartest.
Yeah. I mean, it even got to people wearing deerstalker hats like Sherlock Holmes. There was so many different looks to the casual scene. But what fascinates me about it is that it took hold of every club.
Oh, yeah.
Whether they were, maybe there was a bit of north-south divide, possibly, within different... I mean, within the other people I've interviewed, within the 90s, they said it got all a bit samey with the Stone Island jackets. Yeah. And it was a bit of a uniform. Like you just said with the donkey jackets, if they wore a donkey jacket, they were one of the boys. Where in the 90s, if you seen lads with Stone Island on, then, which I'm wearing today, then they would say, you're up for it, you're one of the boys. And it got a little bit samey, that's not how it started out though, was it, Frank?
Yeah. And I also think it was a bit fraudulent as well, because, look, for want of a better way of putting it, I think the generations have changed. And in the 60s, I just believe you had tougher men. I just think you had tougher blokes on the street in them days, because you'd come from generations of dockers, steel workers, miners, blokes, hard men, hard drinking, hard fighting. And that probably didn't go, down too well with the wives, but big families, loads of brothers, loads of cousins. If you fell out with the wrong family, you was in trouble. I remember being in school, and it was nothing to have a dozen people outside the school waiting, because they told their brothers and cousins, and so it was tough. It was very, very tough, and I think that was reflected on the terraces and in the streets at football, particularly, and as I got older, I didn't find. I'm not being funny. I'm not taking the piss out of anybody who wants to look smart at a football game. When you walk out the door, you're more worried about how you look. Sorry, that's not me. And I could have mentioned. I worked with two young Millwall fellas, and when it came home to roost with me, it was on the Friday, and I will mention it. David and Tommy, and they were Millwall boys, mad Millwall. And one of them asked the other one, what was they wearing tomorrow? And I thought, are you fucking kidding me? I cannot imagine turning around to any of my mates and asking them what I'm going to wear tomorrow to a football match.
So that's a different generation, isn't it, Frank?
But that's my point. I'm not being disrespectful. It's just something that was alien to me. I was more worried about, if we get to their end, who's going to go through the turnstile with me? If it kicks up afterwards, who's going to stand with me? Yeah, who's going to? I was more interested in that and worried about the way I look, quite frankly.
Yeah. All right, I'll ask you a question, Frank, because I think this is this is generational. Personally, I think Tottenham have got a fantastic new stadium. I think I wouldn't call them stadiums; I call them complexes. So my question to you is, why Art Lane or the new one? Where would you rather be?
Well, you've got, what would I have now? 50 years of memories of White Hart Lane, seen some fantastic football, seen some fantastic footballers from all different clubs, different teams, had some great battles, when you've got 10,000 Man United fans coming up the High Road. I mean, that's a sight and a half, isn't it? Liverpool, Newcastle, and obviously your London teams as well. But, in them days, the Northern teams used to bring thousands. And even when it was 50 odd thousand, you was lucky to get in sometimes,
Yeah.
So great memories. And I suppose eventually, not in my time, but other people will experience new memories with a new stadium. And in fact, I'm doing a tour of it. For a birthday present, I'm doing a tour of it this weekend coming and doing the Skywalk. But no, your memories aren't there though, are they? They're not in that stadium. It's all a little bit too. It's all contrived, isn't it? I mean, when we first went to Tottenham, it was mainly standing. Then seats sort of came about, and it got a little bit more modernised. New stands and so on. But this stadium is in a completely different world. It's clearly based on the American model where, they want you in the stadium, a couple of hours before the game, and you that's where you buy your food. That's where you do your
drinking. Yeah.
They've got entertainment in it. They very much, and that's clear because obviously we're going to have the American football. We've had it. We've had a couple of games over there already. So you can see they've looked at the business model of what they do in America. And the same after the game. You can stay in the stadium and have a drink after the game. They'll have bands playing. You can buy, obviously hats and scarves, memorabilia and all that. And the trouble is, you've got to think of the little man on the street, the little man with the stall selling these bits and pieces. Well, they don't want him there, do they? So the council now make it more difficult for you to get a permit to just try and make a few quid on a Saturday. So I'm still old school in that sense. I still like I like to walk out the road and I'm not buying a burger. I like to smell the burgers and get the atmosphere that you remember when you first walked up the High Road.
So my question to you, Frank, if you've got the cheerleaders and you can have a beer in the ground and you can go there hours before and hours after. Is that football, Frank? To you?
Well, it's not got the same rough and tumble, is it, that we remember? I mean, you don't have your Dave Mackays now, do you? You don't have your Billy Bremners. You don't have players like that, because they're not allowed to play like that anymore. They're not allowed to do those sort of tackles.
When I look at
some of the old games on YouTube.
Yeah,
you look at some of the games on YouTube. You look at the state of the pitches for a start. How could anybody play on some of them pitches, right? So why are they're playing good football?
I mean, how they played on some of those turfs. I mean, just shows the skill of the old players.
And we're used to seeing blokes tackle, and that's what I said about older men, a different generation. We were used to seeing people proper tackle each other. If someone got the better of someone, 5 minutes later, that bloke got his own back on the other player. And let's face it, it was like a gladiatorial sport, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We were, it was like Rome. We was watching our heroes, and we wanted to watch our heroes beat the other lot's heroes on the pitch. And if that got a bit physical, they shook hands at the end of the game. They shook hands at the end of the game, didn't they? And that was it. They got on with it. They didn't whinge about it. So, it's all a little bit like, it's too contrived for my liking now, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, what I will say is, and this is another question that I want to ask you, because to me personally, I can't stand them. Half and half scarves, Frank. How do you feel about them?
I think the only time I can remember it when it was kind of acceptable was when you had the half and half hats, and it was Rangers or Celtic. So depending on your preference, there was a lot of that. I mean, in some cases, I mean, you'd see the occasional Aberdeen maybe, or Hearts or Hibs. But generally speaking, there was that period where people were wearing, you know, an half and half hat, and it was either Rangers or Celtic. You sort of like declared your interest, so to speak. But other than that, I mean, God, no, I wouldn't dream of. I don't think I'd ever dream of buying a scarf.
It's a strange concept, isn't it, Frank? I mean, half and half scarf. I don't personally get it, but is it?
I kind of get it. You go to Europe, maybe. You get to a European game and you want some sort of keepsake to say that, you know, reminds you where you've been. I don't think I'd wear the scarf. I might stick it in a bag and bring it home, you
as
know,
a souvenir.
But,
yeah,
to say you know that's where you've been. And any time I've ever done that, I've ended up giving them away to younger people anyway who do collect stuff. So I mean, I wouldn't say every European game I ever went to I bought a scarf, far from it. But I could understand that a little bit more in regards to like a souvenir. But no, I wouldn't dream of wearing an half and half.
Very strange. You've just mentioned Europe, which I'd like to talk about a little bit. What was your experience of their culture when you went over there? Were they behind? Were they fearful of England fans coming over?
Well, I've never followed England, I'll be honest with you, because I was the way I looked at it was I was taking a risk every Saturday, taking a risk every Wednesday. So basically, I was going to football every Saturday, home and away. I was going to every week, you know, every game in the week, whether that was a league match, cup match, European game.
You live
and that even extended to pre-season friendlies, you know, in Europe as well.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, I'm taking a risk as it is. Why do I want to extend that risk by then going to follow England? Because I'm more likely to be fighting other England fans than what I am maybe the opposition. So I decided not to do the England thing. And I think the first time I went to Europe was 78, and Aussie Ardiles, Ricky Villa was signed. Because they just won the World Cup, and Argentina won the World Cup. It was a big shock that we'd signed these two players. And I was in a pub on a Sunday night, and a mate of mine, Billy Kearns, said to me, "Frankie, what are you doing tomorrow night?" I said, "Probably the same as what I'm doing there, Bill, stand next to you having a drink." Why? And he said, Tottenham's playing, what are they called? Royal Antwerp in Belgium.
Yeah.
He said, "I reckon we should go over there and give the boys a welcome." I'd never even been out of the United Kingdom. I'd never been on a boat. And he said, "I still haven't got a passport, Bill." And in them days, you could get a yearly passport, which was a piece of cardboard, you had your phone stuck on it and so on. And the word went round, don't we get no mobiles in them days, but the word went round the pubs, a few of us are going over there. And so I landed up on a disco boat, which I thought was brilliant. I soon got the taste for that. And we were on the disco boat, we went over to Antwerp, and we went in there, we went in one of their supporters clubs. Of course, it kicked off straight away. They didn't want us in there. Yeah, they were fearful of us. They were genuinely worried about us. And you have to remember as well that Tottenham was one of the first teams to have trouble in Europe because of final. We'd had trouble.
Yeah.
So to go to, they kind of knew in advance that we were trouble, for want of a better way of putting it.
Yeah.
And that they were very fearful. I mean, there could be 10 of you and 50 of them, and they'd be wary. So you kind of knew you had it psychologically. You had it over them already before you even started.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And,
I mean, what I'm going to say,
Frank,
what I'm going to say, Frank, is now obviously the European culture is ultras everywhere around the world. The only place where it isn't is Britain, is where it first started. So they've kind of got their own culture, and they've built it, and they dress differently, and the fireworks and the pyrotechnics. But when you first went to Europe, would you say they were ready, or or not?
No, not really. No, not really. But it's, when I went to final in the 80s, that was a different kettle of fish altogether. There, I mean, they literally found a bomb in one of the lockers in the station that was designed for us. And I've said it to a lot of people. I've never seen so many tools in my life, And the old Bill were letting them walk around with them as well.
Literally turning the blind eye.
And a few of us, I think it was about, we'll say 80 of us for argument's sake. It could have been 100 of us.
Yeah.
80 of us got into their end. And for a while, they didn't want to come near us. I don't think they could believe we'd had the front to go in their end, And I was walking around with an umbrella. I thought I was the business. Every time someone was a bit brave, I was doing this with the umbrella.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, there was a big surge. And it probably saved me because from a distance, I could see a bloke with an axe and there was another bloke with a sword. And they was heading right towards me. And I thought, fucking hell. And then all of a sudden, it seemed like nearly every Ajax fan around you, beg your pardon, Ajax, that's a different fight, every final fan just pulled out a blade. They just all had tools. And it was the surge of the crowd that pushed us down the steps towards the pitch. Thankfully, it wasn't fenced. And it was a little bit of a fence, but you could get over it onto the pitch. We hadn't done that. Yeah, I think someone would have died, quite frankly, because as you was getting pushed down, all the ones at the side, you thought you was getting punched in the side of the back. But when people were walking around the pitch, they suddenly went like that and their hand was wet. And actually been stabbed. They just assumed it was a punch,
Yeah.
So, but that surge probably saved a lot of people because it just made you automatically had to get, it was like a wave, you had to get on the pitch. I think if we'd have had time to stand and fight, I reckon we'd have got badly done. And outside, it was mental. It was absolutely crazy outside. So that was probably the first time I sort of saw resistance, for want of a better way of putting it. From
why do you think
proper resistance?
Why do you think they took it that far, Frank? To see someone in football with a sword isn't normal, is it? Why do you think they took it that far? Was it because of the original thing at Feyenoord, revenge, or
possibly? Yeah, possibly. There was a lot of arrests the first time round. It was like damage done. But yeah, I just didn't. I was amazed. I just couldn't believe it. Even if I hadn't seen the sword, even if I hadn't seen the axe, you'd have had to have backed off because you just know. Well, I didn't necessarily so much because I had the umbrella, but I wouldn't blame anybody else that backed off because I say I've never seen so many tools, and there wasn't a copper inside. So we done well. We done well when we first went in here. We scattered them and formed a big circle, and we stood our ground, but. No, it's just a crazy place. And then over the years, you did kind of see it, a couple of times in Germany when we was in Germany, Ajax. I went to a pre-season friendly match tournament in Ajax. People was out there for about 4 days. And we were in there and we was taking the piss. And all they were doing was taking their belts off and trying to hit you from a distance, with a buckle. We were just laughing, throwing blood dolls at them and doing all sorts of nonsense,
Yeah.
But over the years, Ajax got a bit tasty. So
yeah,
they all get there in the long run.
I think, like you say, Frank, the reputation of English firms and the so-called English disease, because that's what hooliganism is called. Sometimes reputations work for you. Like you said, you've got the psychological edge over them already. Then sometimes reputations work against you. And that's why Feyenoord were tooled up and fucking one geezer had a sword. I mean, I've never heard such a thing.
Well, I think we had it. I think for years, as I say, psychologically, we had it. I mean, Arsenal in the late 60s, early 70s, they were really well known for having a big firm. Arsenal, a really big firm, and I was too young to appreciate it because I never saw it. So I'd never seen it, so it didn't exist to me. So the 70s and the 80s, or the early 80s, I'd only ever known us take a liberty. I'd only ever known us go over to Arsenal, go to North Bank. You know, Aurora would go up, there'd be a surge, and we'd take after North Bank sometimes more than they push us back. The old bill would separate you. But basically, we should never have been in there, and we were, and, you know, and we took liberties. Now, as I said to you, that changed. That did change. And by the same token, I would say that psychologically, West Ham had it over us. Right. So I know for a fact, you know, 400 or 500 geezers might travel to go over to West Ham. But I bet they weren't the same 400 or 500 geezers by the time you got there. Do you know what I'm saying? Because it was almost an assumption that they was going to do us. Yeah. So it did exactly. Yeah. So when people said stand, you turned around and you thought, "Fuck, where's everyone gone?" Yeah. Because I'm already expecting to lose, and it took a long time before that mentality changed. Because Tottenham weren't a proper mob. It was, you know, you'd have a mob from, you know, Kentish Town, Camden Town, Somers Town. You'd have a mob from Edgware, Colindale, Hendon, Burnt Oak. You'd have a mob from Enfield. You'd have a mob from. It wasn't particularly well organised. It wasn't one mob. And West Ham, they're famous for it. I mean, they are famous for being organised. So if you're already going over there thinking, well, they're organised and we're not, it's not a good idea, is it? Really? Oh, yeah. But it takes one occasion. You're in. It was all right at home. It was all right at home when we played them, but it was just that. I suppose a bit like when people talking about going to Millwall. If you've never been to Millwall, they've got that reputation. Millwall, definitely, Frank. Yeah. So you're wary before you even get there. Yeah. And I mean, when we played Millwall, blimey, when was that? Second division, the famous Boxing Day. I know people who stand in a pub to this day and talk about that battle with Millwall. I can tell you now, they never even went. They'll stand there and tell you chapter and verse what took place at Ilderton Road and what took place in the Old Kent Road. They'll tell you how many people was at London, met up at London Bridge. They were never there. And I look at them and I think, fuck all, you know, you weren't there. I definitely know you did not go. All right, Frank, just quickly, because you have mentioned two other firms, which was Arsenal and Millwall. Back at the height of your activism, for want of a better word, who were the firms then, Frank? Who, like you've said, West Ham, obviously, well organised. Well, I always say, I don't think you can leave Man United out, to be quite honest, because there were so many of them for a start. Yeah. And it was taking into account the Cockney Reds. The Cockney Reds, yeah. You know, I mean, I'll give them their due. You know, once all the Northerners have got on their coaches, or the Midlands, or anywhere part of the country, let's face it, they came from all over the place. Or they got on their trains back at Euston, or King's Cross, St Pancras, depending which part of the country they came from. They only left the Cockney Reds, didn't it? So round the back of Euston Station, you know, what we call Somers Town, all around Charlton Street, the pubs around there, the Lion and Land, the Coffee House, the Lord Somers. They stood their ground. I'll give them credit where it's due. You know, they stood their ground. You know, we had some blinding tear-ups for the Cockney Reds. So sheer weight of numbers. I mean, no wonder they called them the Red Army, because they were like an army. Yeah. But you've already said the Northern clubs. Maybe not a firm, but for numbers. Scousers used to we used to come down in thousands. As I say, Newcastle were another lot. Didn't necessarily have. I don't ever remember it in the 70s with. I mind you saying that Villa in the early 70s. I mean, one stage they was in the third division. They wasn't even in the first division. In fact, we played them in the League Cup final. We was in the first division, and they were in the third division. But I don't remember them coming in massive numbers, the Midland sides. I really don't. No, I don't. Because the Zulus, if I'm honest, not really. No. Later on, I know they had firms that had reputations. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But for me, no. So you couldn't judge Millwall back then because Millwall weren't in the top division. No. So you didn't get to play them enough to kind of work out who was the top dogs. You might bump into them at Euston one weekend or on the undergrounds, you know, but you never played them. And then, funny enough, we played them in the, I think, late 60s, early 70s. And I went over to Tottenham, went into the Park Lane, and there was just these massive blokes. I'd never seen them before. And Millwall just taken the Park Lane. They just literally walked in. Because they were like grown men. You know, we were teenagers and they were like grown men. But of course, years later, when we were grown men and we played on that Boxing Day, you know, we gave a good account of ourselves over Millwall. And we've done it again since. We've done it again since as well. But West Ham, I think, consistently, I think were probably, pound for pound, they were probably the better organised. I mean, the Mile End, I remember the Mile End mob, you know, they were a bit tasty, to say the least. But they had mobs all over the place, from all over the place, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
But then, your generation would be different. Your memory, you know, your memories would be different from mine.
This is your account, Frank.
Because obviously after that, I think Portsmouth bought about 10,000 to one White Hart Lane one night.
657, well known.
You know,
my
so
generation.
Where'd you stop? I mean, you know, the Zulus. I mean, I think what I remember in the 70s, the firm that for a couple of seasons at least was Forest. You know, Forest had a tasty firm. But then I can remember going to Stoke. And you know, and it being, and that's before any of this naughty 40 lark, you know, where people started having names. You was known by your end of the stadium, weren't you? You tended to be the North Bank, the Park Lane, the Shed, whatever. You didn't have these fancy names, which I've got to say, we've probably got the worst of them all. I can't stand it. I can't stand all that yid. I can't stand it. I think it's got to be the least imaginative name anyone ever thought of. And why would you call yourselves what other people are calling you? Fuck that. I think it's nonsense. I mean, it's not really threatening, is it? I mean, it's not like bushwhackers or headhunters. I mean, at least that sounds a bit threatening. But yids, I mean, what's that? I mean, come on. Someone must have had a bit more imagination than yids. I get the story. I get that's what everyone used to call us. And people say, oh, well, we turned it on its head and we decided to call ourselves up. I can't stand
not having it. Okay, Frank. Not when, but really, why did you decide, and when did you decide this wasn't you anymore?
It's simple. I went to prison.
that was the line, was it?
I went to prison in '93, so they didn't let you out to go to football, unfortunately. No. that probably. And then I suppose, you know, when you are away, you start to think, "Fuck me," you know. One, you don't want to get nicked again, do you? You certainly don't want to go away again.
No.
You know you're going to go out of football. There's every chance you're going to get nicked. You're going to get nicked.
The technology got better.
And you think of all the money you spent. You think of all the money you spent over the years, all the miles that you did. Oh, you enjoyed it at the time. Don't get me wrong.
Of course.
But the irony is, all the times I've got nicked at football, and I didn't go to prison. In fact, in the 70s and 80s, I got nicked so many times. The difference was you didn't always get charged. You know, in the 70s, you get a whack around a year old. You get a kick out the arse. You know, two coppers can't arrest 10 people. So they can arrest 2 and the rest are set to fuck off. And you're lucky that week. But the next home game, you might be the unlucky one. And the times I got away with it, not actually being arrested. And then I did eventually. I got nicked against Arsenal. I got nicked before the game, and then came out after the game had finished, and got nicked again. And different copper, obviously, because what happened was I came out the police station and I said to the fella, "Hey, mate, what was the score?" He said 5-0. Arsenal beat us 5-0. So at the fucking high road, got involved again and ended up getting nicked. So when the copper brought me into the station. You know, Tottenham Nick in the high road, the old desk sergeant went to me, "I've had you once today, haven't I?" And I said, "Yeah, mate, you have, yeah." I said, "Yeah."
You thought
fair play to him.
That was time to knock it on the head.
Imagine going up to the old woman. Imagine going up to the old woman and telling her you got nicked twice in the same.
Twice in one day. Oh, you've been in the doghouse for months.
Yeah. Yeah. So he stuck me in a cell for an hour. He let all the crowd die down, and I didn't get charged for the second one. And then I had a little sequence of I got nicked against Arsenal at the North Bank. I got nicked up in Liverpool. I got nicked at West Brom. It started to become a bit of an habit, you know.
Yeah.
And I thought, fuck this. And as I say, once it got early 90s, I got nicked for something else.
Yeah.
And it kind of, I still went when I came out, but I was wary. I'd have a row still, but I was more careful. I'd still go to Europe because you tended to get away with it in Europe. You could get away with it in Europe, couldn't you?
Yeah, people say that. It's like
you could take liberties in Europe.
Yeah.
But they just slung you on a boat or back on the plane, whichever way you got there.
Yeah.
But yeah, of course. Look, how can I put it? If it's been your culture, it's what you've grown up. If that's all you've known, if that's how you've, that's the camaraderie in it. I say to people, when you go somewhere, I remember going to Stoke once, and I was only about 16, 17.
Yeah.
And there was these blokes older than me and a lot bigger than me. And a big firm of Stoke come round the corner. And some of these blokes had it on their toes. I couldn't believe it. And I thought, this is it now. This is I'm either going to run or I'm going to stand.
Yeah.
And I stood. I got a couple of belts off the people. I half-heartedly give a few punches back. But the following week in the pub, I had blokes I'd never met before come up to me and say, well done, mate. Well done.
You respect.
I see you standing. And then the old reputation starts in, doesn't it? And then you go to games and, away games, and you say, right, we're going to go over the turnstile. And you look about and you think, someone said it, but who the fuck's going to go through it? Yeah. Well, once you've gone through, there's no going back, is there?
No.
And I remember going to Sheffield United in the 70s. I remember going to Sheffield United. They just got promoted in the 70s, probably 72, 73, same year as Leicester got promoted. This is the old first division, obviously. Yeah. And someone said, right, we're going through the turnstile. And fuck me, when we got through, there was this big bank of steps, and there was hundreds of them. And I thought, who in their right mind is going to walk up them steps? You're going to get kicked. You're going to get kicked straight back down again.
Of course, there's too many of them.
But the old bill came, anyway, But the thing is, you've gone through the turnstile. So again, the following week, people recognise that. People say, oh, fuck me, I see you went through the turnstile.
One of the boys. Yeah.
So it's, but listen, fair play to all the boys. I've got respect from all. Now I talk to a lot of, fellas from, we'll say gangs, mobs, firms, I mix with them now quite comfortably. There's none of this, we was harder than you. You swap stories, you tell it how it is.
Yeah, you
try not to embellish it too much, and you put your hands up. I mean, I got concussed by Arsenal because I took the liberty. I deserved it. We'd been fighting outside. Yeah. They'd gone into where they were supposed to be. Some of us went in with them, all kicked off. And then the old Bill slung Tottenham out. Yeah. And I've done that. I've made out I've been hurt, They left me in there. A big mistake. I wish I'd got slung out because I went to the toilet and some fellas see me go to the toilet, some Arsenal boys. And I woke up in a cubicle.
Oh, they followed you in.
First thing, I've never been at a urinal, but somehow waking up in a cubicle. And I thought, fuck this. And I felt for years in case one of them had taken a trophy,
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And
then I felt dizzy, and I landed up having to go to North Middlesex Hospital with concussion. So, I wrote a book, and some of my mates went, don't fucking put that in the book. Don't tell them you got done, but come on, that's part of the story, isn't it?
It's
that's part of the story.
Okay, Frank, we'll finish up there of you being concussed in a cubicle. What I will say, Frank, is what's Frank doing now then? You've got your podcast. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks for that, Matty. I appreciate that. Yeah, I wrote a book a couple of years ago. it's not a football book as such, but it clearly mentions me growing up, working class boy, your first fight at school, that kind of thing. It's my story, and it goes into other areas. It goes into street politics. It goes into paramilitary activity, connected with Northern Ireland. It's a complete story, And my pal said to me, Frank, you should write a book. I said, I'm not into all that writing books. That's what the middle classes do, write books. But working class folks don't do that. Well, of course, we do a lot more now.
Yeah.
And they said, well, Frank, if you got run over by a bus tomorrow, that'd be 30 years of our history gone as well. It's a bit of, social and political history.
It is social history.
I felt obliged to. I felt obliged to do it then. I did feel obliged to do it. And so I've done the book. By chance, someone read it, and he took me out for lunch, and he said, "Have you considered doing speaking?" So I joined Professional Speakers Speaking Association. I've been doing that the last couple of years. Now it's been difficult because it's all online, but we've all got to get used to that now.
Yeah.
So I've done that. I've got a new website being constructed at the moment. That explains a bit more. I sent you my book.
Yeah.
There's a business card inside the book. I posted that this morning, so you should get that in the next couple of days.
Yeah. And
then a fella said to me, have you ever considered doing podcasts? And I said, look, how many podcasts can you do, like with football or whatever and so on? And I thought, well, it'd be good practice for when I am doing speaking, to various audiences. And I've done a few showcases for different regions and so on. And I'd like to do that more. So we started the podcast, and we decided to call it Frankly Speaking with Frank Portinari, basically inviting people to just be comfortable and sit and tell their story. And really the criteria of coming on to it, as I say, that I want real and inspiring people. So it doesn't have to be some big villain. It doesn't have to be some famous footballer. I've had a couple of those. I like to speak to ordinary people who may not necessarily get access to a podcast or social media, YouTube.
Yeah, no, it's very true.
So I like to give people an opportunity to come on, tell us about themselves. If there's a moral to the story, that's good. And in a lot of cases, they have inspired people, and I've had ex-soldiers, and I've had a couple of footballers. One of them, two of them, unfortunately, had been victims of sexual abuse when they were children. So that was hard to sit and listen to. But as I say, that is the idea, to have people that I'm interested in for a start. Hopefully, the audience are interested in. And equally, if there's campaigns, and funny enough, the next interview I'm doing is about knife crime. I'm speaking to a knife victim, and we're going to dedicate that episode to change your life, put down your knife. So I'd like to think we're doing a little bit of social good with it as well. Anyone's got any charities, if they give us enough notice, we'll advertise their charity or their campaign for them. So I'm thoroughly enjoying that.
That's good, Frank. Well, it's been great to talk to you, mate. Really wait with anticipation for your book. So that has been Frank Portinari. Frank,
very well said.
Frankly Speaking is this podcast. You said that your website is under construction. So what's the title going to be on that? Just quickly to let them.
It will just be straightforward: www.frank-portinari.com.
And there you have it. You've heard it from the man himself. Okay, thanks.
And that's under construction. I already had one, but I've got another one being constructed at the moment, and basically it's far more professional for what I want to do in the future.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks, Frank. It's been great to talk to you, and there'll be more videos coming from UK Casuals soon.